the last line of the book is, it can be done, but somebody always has to begin it.
Welcome to VoiceOver. I'm your host, Heather Bigley, and I talk to people about the movies that made a mark, that led to cinematic epiphanies, and it's not always the movie you'd expect. Today's movie is Akira Kurosawa's 1952 Ikiru. Takashi Shimura, one of Kurosawa's longtime collaborators, plays Kanji Watanabe, an aging bureaucrat with stomach cancer who is pushed to find meaning in his final days. And the film is probably best known for its radical construction, meaning how the film's plot is organized in, yes, nonlinear fashion, but it has this two-part structure, when Watanabe is alive and when Watanabe is dead. The film won Kurosawa his second Kinema Junpo, Best One Award, a film magazine in Japan, after Rashomon and before Seven Samurai, and a Silver Bear at the Berlin Film Festival. My guest today is Gareth Higgins, a writer from Belfast, Northern Ireland, now living in Nashville, North Carolina. His most recent book, co-authored with Kathleen Norris, is A Whole Life in 12 Movies, a cinematic journey to a deeper spirituality. He is the founding director of the Wild Goose Festival, and he holds a PhD in sociology from Queen's University, Belfast. Stick around after the conversation for more movies.
I grew up in Belfast in the north of Ireland, and there was a fella who I consider to be one of my great mentors, a guy called Michael Open, who was his job title was not very poetic. It was administrator of the art house cinema in Belfast, but he was really a wizard, and he went and took hard copies of all the film magazines that he had collected over 25, maybe nearly 30 years in the business as a cinema operator. And he created his own database and compiled a list of all the films that had ever been voted as one of the 10 best films ever made. And he kind of crunched the numbers to come up with a list of 300 films. And his goal was to screen each of those films once during 1995, the year of the 100th anniversary of cinema. And I think he nearly achieved that goal. I certainly saw lots of those 300 films. I was at university at the time. The theatre was on the university campus. They would have some matinee screenings. And so a lot of my introduction to the great films was an incredible gift of an experience, because I got to see them in a theatre the first time that I saw them. And Ikiru was one of them. I'm pretty sure that's when I saw Ikiru for the first time. Another Michael, Mike Cato, who's an art professor in Belfast, convinced me of why watching a movie in a theatre is categorically different from watching it at home. And it's not just for ideological reasons, and it's certainly not for elitist reasons. What Mike Cato said was the difference between watching a movie in a theatre and watching a movie at home is the difference between visiting the pyramids and going to the Egypt room at the British Museum. The Egypt room is an authentic experience, but it's really only a facsimile of the real thing. So I was 20 and I'm watching this film that's about a man who's been given 6 months to live. And, you know, most people when they're 20 aren't thinking about that for themselves. You know, I hadn't thought about my own death for myself. And of course, the point of this film, what Ikiru means, Ikiru does not mean dying. It means to live or living. Yeah. And he discovers in confronting not only his impending death, but the life that's gone before, that the life has been kind of a mistake. And he discovers the grace not to spend the rest of his life feeling despair for the mistake, but fully giving himself to the possibility that was always in front of his nose. And there's a paradox there, because maybe it wasn't in front of his nose. Maybe it only emerged in front of his nose once he realized that he was going to lose it. And that seems to be a universal truth. So yeah, so I'm now 51. That the film has been in my mind and my heart for 30 years now, and I suspect you could probably start watching it in your mid-teens and get something really meaningful from it. And I imagine you could watch it as an elder, as a person who is facing into the last part of their life, and hopefully be comforted by it, or provoked into the truth that at some level it actually is never too late. At some level, you always have the capacity to choose.
Yeah. I think I have so many reactions to like everything you just said. One of them being like, I mean, you have a vision for yourself that you're going to be like amazing and accomplish so many things. But really, every day you have to make the choice of, will I let just the sort of everyday nature of my life get me down, or will I aspire to make better decisions of how I'm spending my time? And I think Ikiru is really beautiful and also super complex, because it's not like, I think it's so interesting that we don't see him accomplishing the new goal. Right? We get it. We get a few flashbacks.
Yeah, we
like,
get kind of a taster of the start of it.
Yeah, we get like the first half of this movie is him having the realization and grieving very much. Like, what have I done? What have I lost? Trying to explore like ways of like, well, what do I do now? Right? And he has like, you know, he goes to a dance hall and he spends his night drinking, and, you know, he's just sort of processing the fact, all of this loss. And then the second half is the funeral, which is like one of the most amazing like sort of constructions in a movie. And then we get these little moments where like we see him with the women and he's looking at the site, and then you know, we can talk about the last time we see him. But that's so fascinating to me. Why do you think in this film we're told all of this not from his perspective of what it meant to actually accomplish the goal he sets for himself, but we're told from other people's perspective?
It really struck me watching it again the other night, the radical decision that Akira Kurosawa took to have what could be the culminating moment of the plot happen halfway or 2/3 of the way through the film, where just like literally all of a sudden we're at his funeral, and I think the voiceover says something like, "Our protagonist is now dead," you know?
Yes.
and it kind of hits you, but then, as you say, the rest of the film is kind of flashbacks and a slight flash forward at the very end, or bringing us right up to date to what happened after the turn in his journey, after he'd gone through the shock and the despair, not only the despair of how he has lived his life, and he hasn't been an immoral person. He's just mistakenly gone along with the cultural norm that says the world of work matters more than anything else, with the potential exception of your reputation. These are the two things that matter. He's bereaved. He was widowed young, and we see that he's part of this is he has devoted himself to his son in the way that he knew how. But I wonder if the moment where we see him saying goodbye to his son going off to the war on the train, and his son's, you know, there's a whole lot of things going on there: terror, loss, regret, the sense of there's something I want to communicate to you, Dad, and I can't, and I think I'm going to die. I don't think you're going to see me again. And of course he comes back from, he doesn't die in the war. This film was made 7 years after the end of the Second World War. I just wonder, I'd like to read something about this or learn from people who know if this is a very clear critique of the Japanese imperial myth that drove so much of the horror that Japan perpetrated on others and the horror that was perpetrated on Japanese people. that this is like, do not waste your life on aggression. Do not waste your life on not saying the things that matter the most. And I can imagine the Japanese people watching this film were deeply moved by that scene of him going off on the train. It gives me a little bit of sympathy for the son, who's not a very sympathetic character. For most of the film, he only expresses gratitude after his father has died, and it's kind of only a hint of gratitude. The subtlety of the storytelling here is truly astonishing. The fact that all the loose ends are tied up. That the son says to his wife, "I found an envelope in the house that he had left there last night. He must have known that he was going to die, and he's given me the path to getting my inheritance properly. So we don't worry that that's not going to happen." When the mourners or someone, I can't remember who it is, asked the question, "What about the woman who the son and wife thought he was having a culturally scandalous relationship with?" And actually, he's just having a beautiful friendship. He's being mentored by a younger person into opening up his heart. And they asked, "Did she, we didn't see her come to the mourning space?" And then it cuts to an image of the little toy bunny rabbit that she was making, which is a strong implication. Oh yeah, she was there. They just didn't see her. And that we are comforted in the knowledge that she knows that he has died, and that she may now understand more about his distress and the last night that they saw each other. At any rate, the main point is, why does this happen halfway through or a third of the way through the film? I think it is because the structure of storytelling, even in the stories with the best intent, can risk a kind of catharsis that ultimately negates the potential power of the story. If all that happens when you watch the really moving story is that you cry and you feel better about yourself, and then the movie's over and you stagger out into the daylight and then you forget the film, that's not as good as if 2/3 of the way through the film, the thing that you thought was going to happen at the end of the film takes place, and then the rest of it educates, provokes, and inspires you to really think about your own life. I'm often irritated by the fact that literally the poster image that is typically used for Ikiru is of him on the swing, which is a spoiler. Like, the poster is a spoiler. And the surprise of him being on the swing is not the point. The point is to ask us, what's your swing? And that really this word protagonist, which is I think it's in the first scene, and then it comes whenever he has died. It's a very interesting word, because it's not just that Mr. Watanabe is the protagonist of the film. The question is he going to become the protagonist of his own life? And his colleague, who a few months after his death he's the last one standing among the guys who all said, we're going to live differently because of him. And then within a few months, they've all gone back to their old ways, except this one guy. And we see this exquisite image of him on the bridge looking down at the playground. And there isn't even a close-up on his face. I mean, Kurosawa he's not going to do the work for us that could give us a catharsis that will reduce the impact of the film. Putting the cathartic moment earlier, putting the pivot point earlier, gives you the whole last third of the film to think. And it is a film that pushes you to think. The point is for us to think about these things. But the point is for me to go home and write in my journal. I would say if you watch Ikiru and you don't change your life, then either your life is perfect already and you're already living in a kind of a spiritual Elysium, or you maybe need to watch it again. And you maybe need to watch it again after that.
I love what you're saying here. I've been also thinking, since I watched the movie, about the sadness I do feel about the relationship between the father and the son, and wishing, we have at the end the son saying, "Oh," like him trying to convince himself, my father didn't know that he was going to die, therefore I couldn't have done anything differently in how I treated him, and me longing for maybe just for Mr. Watanabe to have just a moment with his son where there can be reconciliation and emotional intimacy. And so when I finished watching the film this time, that's the thing that stayed with me the most was, oh, am I connecting with the people around me in a way that will be valuable to both of us, right? Instead of letting resentments and petty grievances, stand in the way of having a relationship. I do think the film, though, is saying very seriously, like, what are you doing to help people in the world? And as a Christian, I read, what are you doing to help, the least of these, right? Like Mr. Watanabe decides he's going to help these women, which either comically or frustratingly are shown moving through the bureaucracy in the first part of the film and going to office to office to office to office to get some help to clean up this playground or to create a playground. And he decides, I'm going to help those women. So I think those two messages are very strong in the film. And this time through, I was really attracted to that one about relationship.
Yeah. It's never too early to say sorry, and it's never too early to offer forgiveness. If you define forgiveness as beginning with the decision to not take revenge, I come from a society where people talk a lot about forgiveness and forgiveness for the most monstrous things human beings can do to each other, primarily taking life and harming other people. There's a continuum here of deciding to not take revenge, and the behavior of the other person may need to be interrupted because maybe they're still doing this thing that is causing harm, and then they may need to be restrained in some way, hopefully through a restorative justice mechanism, not causing more harm to them. And then some accountability and amends are often helpful. Even if I just accidentally stand on your toe, I owe you something. What I'm talking about is in the realm of Mr. Watanabe and his son, and what is equitable forgiveness. Stage 1 is not take revenge. Stage 2, somebody needs to interrupt the behavior if it's still continuing. Stage 3, some kind of accountability and appropriate amends, which may not be made to the person, the individual. The individual may not want the amends. That's fine. So you live the amends. The fourth thing is, what can we do for the person who's been impacted? And the fifth is, what can we learn from this to reduce the likelihood of these things happening in the future? And in the life of Mr. Watanabe and his son, yes, his son, it would be appropriate for his son to apologize to Mr. Watanabe. It would be appropriate. That can still happen after Mr. Watanabe dies. That can still happen. I think it would be appropriate for his son to apologize to himself for the standard he's held himself to. There's also, maybe Mr. Watanabe wants to apologize to his son as well for, I think I was too rigid. I don't think I opted for the best decision here, but I did the best I could. And I really do think that you can apologize to people even after they've died. That the amends you can make toward other people, even if you're not able to make them directly to the person. And if you're not able to say, and in reverse, if you're not able to receive an apology or amends from somebody else, either because the relationship's so broken or because the person is dead or because they maybe they would never grasp the gravity of the impact that they had on you, you can receive apologies from other people. You can cultivate relationships where there's a two-way street of bearing with each other with grace. And best of all, you can go and build a playground for children, or whatever your version of that might be.
I'd never considered that Mr. Watanabe, in creating the playground, might in some way
doing
also
something
be
for
trying
his
to
son.
connect with his son. Yeah,
Yeah,
which I'd never thought about
either.
before.
Yeah,
that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, and when his friend says, making these little toy rabbits makes me feel like I'm bringing joy to all the children of Japan. And again, a less subtle filmmaker would then have Mr. Watanabe say out loud, "Oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder what I can do for the children of Japan."
Right.
Let's build a playground, Back to one other thing you were talking about, like relationship, and the other level being, I think what you were moving toward was choice. Because it turns out that this pile of papers on Mr. Watanabe's desk and all his colleagues' desks can be reduced one paper at a time, and the only thing that is preventing it being reduced is that the people who have those papers in front of them either don't know that they can choose or don't want to choose. There's an extraordinary book by Mark Kurlansky called Nonviolence. I think the subtitle is The History of a Dangerous Idea. It's a history of nonviolence and how nonviolence has been used to transform societies. And the last chapter is like a culminating piece about, here's all these amazing things, here's a summary of all these amazing things nonviolence has done. And then I think the last line of the book is, it can be done, but somebody always has to begin it. Like, that's the thing. Like, there's so many of us who are simply not choosing the thing that we could choose because we don't know that we can, or because we don't want to. And maybe we don't want to partly because we don't know, or because we haven't seen somebody else model it for us, which is why I really like that the film doesn't end with all 6 or 10 of his colleagues starting a transformational social movement. It's realistic about the fact that, in a sense, the film is portraying the thing I was trying to describe earlier. The funeral is the cathartic moment for most of his colleagues. And then the catharsis disappears. But one of them can't let go of it. And we know that at the end of the film, he's going to go and build his playground. And he doesn't need a terminal diagnosis to motivate him to do it. He is privileged to have had to have glimpsed insight into Mr. Watanabe's life, and he's going to go and pursue this. I think that's much more. It's much more realistic as a portrayal of how change often happens, and it's useful to the viewer. The film, by assigning the baton from Mr. Watanabe to the next guy, says much more clearly to each of us as individuals, you can do this too. You ask yourself, what are the parameters of the realistic effect of your choices in the world? That's where your integrity is being invited to show up. All of us have capacity to choose an impact and effect around us. A lot of us need to be initiated into the knowledge of that, woken up to the knowledge of that, encouraged in the knowledge of that. Some of us have lived subject to social structures that have said you're less than, and so your contribution doesn't matter. Some of us have been told you're not allowed to make a contribution because of the system's perception of your gender, or of your race, or of your sexual orientation, or of your education, or of your socioeconomic background. This is all nonsense. It's worse than that. It's demonic nonsense. If it's dehumanizing, it's demonic. What's angelic, what's truly living, is to wake up to the absolute equal value of every human life, and the astonishing creative possibility that every human being has within them. Some of us need a bit more help than others to get started. Mr. Watanabe has way more power than he's admitting to himself at the start, like way more power. Some of us, our primary job is to share that. And it's not that I don't blame Mr. Watanabe for not doing these things until he's terminally ill. He's in a system that's feeding on itself, and it turns out there are literally people who are literally violent who are standing in his way too. And this is actually another one of my favorite moments in the film, is when he confronts the crime boss in the corridor. He's there with his flunkies to try to intimidate him. For some reason, that crime boss doesn't want playgrounds to be built. I imagine they want to do something else. His response to the crime boss, effectively telling him, we'll hurt you if you do this, is to just look at him with a faint smile, just to look at him. And it's like he's like beaming laser accountability from his eyes into the crime boss's eyes. What can you do to me when I've accepted the inevitability of my own death? What can you do to me when I've given up all notions of reputation? What can you do to me when I've decided that love actually is stronger than death? That's the way I'm going to live.
I do want to talk a little bit about what we do see of him pursuing the project and the challenges he faces. You brought up a lot of really interesting things I want to react to. And one is, I was really moved. I mean, I know enough about Japanese culture to know about the bow, right? And I was really moved as he approached all these different department heads and wanted to negotiate with them to make this happen. The humility of the bow that he was using with them. Because I just thought, here is the man who is letting go, as you said, of his reputation, and he's letting go of how he feels like he should be perceived, and is coming to these people and just again and again and again, not to be dismissed, not to be ignored, but he's doing it in this utter humility.
I love when legitimate authority is held with that kind of humane humility. I love when, on occasions when I've said to people, I know you're very busy, and they respond by saying, my time is not worth more than yours. I'm kind of coming to the view that a little bit like whether Mr. Watanabe knows that this is his mission. I think it's part of the calling that I bumped into in my life, and I would hazard to say I think it's part of everybody's calling, which is to validate the utterly unique and totally equally valuable diamond that each human existence is. The point of platforms and power is not to replicate it so that more people can join you on the platform. It's so that everybody can come to realize they don't need to be on the platform in order to be a valid person. In the eschatological future, there'll be no platforms. And if you have a platform now, you really should be using part of it to help liberate other people into recognizing their own astonishing value. That they deeply, deeply matter in ways that the culture denies, in the ways that the economy denies, in ways that some parts of religion deny. You are not only called to discern what is the playground that you can build and what are the authority structures you can push against, because only you can do that, and maybe you need to bow even if you don't mean it in order to get the right thing done. Not only is what is the playground you're called to build, but you are entitled to have this moment of euphoria on a swing in the snow singing your favorite song. You are entitled to that. No more than anybody else, but certainly no less.
Thanks to Gareth for speaking with me. It was a real gift to watch Ikiru again at this stage in my life. Gareth mentioned while we were chatting the 2022 British remake of Ikiru with Bill Nye, and I'm going to check that out when I have a minute. And this move of Kurosawa movies being translated into English language films is not new. I've recommended Seven Samurai to you guys, about a group of samurai who come together to save a small village from oppression and exploitation. In 1960, John Sturges turned that into The Magnificent Seven. Kurosawa's 1961 Yojimbo, about a lone samurai playing two rival gambling bosses against each other, became Sergio Leone's 1964 A Fistful of Dollars. And Kurosawa's 1958 The Hidden Fortress, about two bickering peasants who escape prison and then meet a refugee princess on the run, had a massive influence on a little film from 1977 called Star Wars. You'll see if you watch these films that Ikiru feels like a real outlier at first. It takes place in contemporary society, not some hazy samurai past, and there's nary a sword fight. But Kurosawa is very much concerned in all of his films with self-realization or self-discovery of the hero in relation to the greater community. And that's what makes his films so attractive, I think, to Americans. VoiceOver is a production of BYU Radio and is edited by Spencer Boyer with additional post-production support by Nick Levitt. I'm your host, Heather Bigley.